was lying under the bed when the footsteps entered the room, slow and deliberate, close enough that dust shook loose from the frame above me. My phone was clenched in my hand, with the screen glowing weakly, and no signal bars showing, while my breathing scraped against my teeth because I was afraid any sound would give me away. Someone moved closer to the dresser, and I could see shoes stop just inches from where my face was pressed to the floor. I stayed still because hiding had always worked before, and because panic had trained me to wait rather than run. Then I heard my mother's voice call my name from the hallway, clear and calm, like she always did. I did not react at first, because she had always known where I hid when I was scared. The strange part was that the people in the room kept saying my full name instead of the shortened one my mother used. Their voices sounded careful and official, like they were following instructions they did not fully believe in. My mother's voice spoke again and told me not to be afraid, using the same gentle tone she used when I was small. She said it the way she always said it, slowly, like it was a rule we had practiced. I stayed silent because silence had always meant safety. I remembered hiding under beds in different rooms over the years, always waiting for her to find me. The footsteps shifted and someone bent down, but they did not look under the bed. My mother told me to stay exactly where I was and reminded me how we used to play. I noticed then that none of them spoke to her or responded to her voice. The room smelled like cleaning spray and old fabric, not like home. I tried to text for help, but the message stayed unsent. Someone said my name again, louder this time, still using the full version that felt unfamiliar in my ears. My mother's voice told me they would go away if I stayed quiet long enough. I followed the rule because rules had kept me alive before. My thoughts drifted to small details I had ignored my entire life, like how there were no photos of me as a baby anywhere. I remembered birthdays where only the three of them showed up and sang to me. I remembered never meeting grandparents, cousins, or anyone who shared my face. The footsteps moved back toward the door, and I thought it was finally ending. A hand reached under the bed and stopped just short of touching me. My mother's voice went silent for the first time. The hand pulled back, and someone said they would try again later. I stayed frozen long after the room emptied. I waited for my mother to tell me it was safe. She did not. I crawled out slowly, expecting to see her standing there smiling. The room was empty, except for overturned chairs and the open door. That's when I thought it was over. I had no idea what was about to happen next. I stepped into the hallway slowly, keeping my phone low, listening for my mother's familiar cue that it was safe to move. The apartment felt larger than usual, with doors open that were always closed and lights left on in rooms no one used. I followed the sound of distant movement down the corridor, staying close to the wall the way I always had. A man's voice echoed from the living room, calling my full name again, steady and controlled. I waited for my mother to correct him the way she always corrected people. She did not. I crossed the living room and noticed marks on the floor where furniture had been dragged aside. There were bags near the door that I did not recognize. I heard the elevator open and close somewhere below the building. My phone vibrated briefly with a system alert, but still showed no signal. I went to the kitchen and saw that the table had been cleared completely. The chairs were stacked against the wall, like the space was being prepared for something. I called out softly, using the name I had always used for my mother. No one answered. I checked the bedroom that had always been my parents' room and found the bed stripped bare. The closet stood open and empty. I felt exposed standing there without being told what to do. I sat on the floor and waited, because waiting had always been the correct response. Minutes passed without any sound except the hum of the refrigerator. Then unfamiliar footsteps returned, heavier this time, moving without hesitation. I rushed back toward the bedroom and hid behind the door as it opened. 2 people entered and scanned the room carefully. They spoke to each other using words that did not include my name. One of them looked directly at me and froze. I expected my mother's voice to step in and explain. It did not happen. They approached slowly, with their hands visible. I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall. One of them said my full name again and asked me to sit down. I refused without speaking and waited for permission from the voice that had guided me my whole life. The permission never came. They exchanged a look that made their movements more cautious. I was guided into the living room and seated on the couch. No one asked where my family was. No one mentioned my mother. I stared at the doorway, waiting for her to appear and fix everything. Instead, another unfamiliar person arrived carrying a folder. They spoke gently, but avoided eye contact. I noticed then that no one in the room was waiting for anyone else to arrive. The realization unsettled me, though I still did not understand why. They took me out of the apartment without letting me go back for anything, guiding me through hallways I had walked 1,000 times. But that suddenly felt staged and temporary. Outside, the air was cold and unfamiliar, and no one told me where my mother was waiting. I was seated in a vehicle and told to keep my seatbelt on. The ride was quiet, with only low conversation between the adults that never included names I recognized. When we arrived, I was led into a building that smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. I was placed in a small room with a chair and told to wait. I waited because waiting had always been expected of me. A woman entered later with a calm voice and a clipboard held close to her chest. She said my full name again and asked me to confirm it. I nodded because that was the name they kept using. She began explaining things slowly, mentioning records, dates, and a place I had never heard of. I stopped listening when she said I had arrived somewhere at the age of 3. I interrupted to ask when my mother would come. The woman paused and adjusted her grip on the clipboard. She said there was no contact information listed. I told her that could not be right because my mother always came when called. She looked at another woman standing near the door. They exchanged a brief glance. She said there was no record of parents or siblings connected to me. I laughed once because the statement did not fit any part of my life. I told her about our home, our routines, and the rules I followed. She listened without interrupting. Then she slid the clipboard across the table and pointed to a blank section. She said everything I described stopped appearing in records after my first placement. I stared at the blank space longer than the words around it. I tried to recall a single moment where someone outside my family had interacted with them. I could not. The room stayed quiet while the realization formed through details instead of feelings. I had never been introduced to anyone as their daughter. No one had ever spoken directly to my mother except me. The names I used for them had never appeared on forms. The woman said softly that children sometimes build structures to survive isolation. I stood up and said she was wrong. I said my mother's voice was real. The woman said the voice had never been recorded by anyone else. I reached for my phone to call her and stopped when I realized there was no number saved. I searched my memory for one and found nothing. I sat back down because there was nowhere else to go. The room felt larger without them. I said their names out loud once. No one responded. One last question. If you were in her place at that moment, would you have done the same? Be honest. What does her choice deserve out of 10?